For sure, thank you. I don't know if your university, now my university insists that we put the grant source on PowerPoint presentation. So there it is, that's the grant, that's the source of the
It's very size.
It's not even an email.
It's the smallest you can get. That same size as the phone. Okay, so just to explain a little bit where I'm coming from and in connection with discourse and digital practices. As Chris says, I'm coming from a second language learning background, particularly interested in second language learning in Hong Kong and Asia, and particularly in terms of informal learning. So I'm interested in YouTube comments as a kind of informal learning. And a few years ago, actually, I was doing conference presentations and in language teaching conferences and telling people that, do you know that your students are, you think your students don't use English outside the classroom, but do you know that they're sort of watching YouTube and they're using Facebook and so on? And they say, no, we don't know, but I think now everybody knows that. So I try to move beyond that to try to look at the question of whether now people are doing this in the context of what I call globalization of everyday communication, whether people are actually learning when they are using second languages in spaces like Facebook and, well, particularly YouTube in my case. So I'm looking, I initially began looking at language learning, second language learning, but very quickly realized that a lot of the second language learning that takes place informally is not actually learning language, but either learning about language or learning about cultural contexts of language and so on. So what I'm looking at really is evidence of language and intercultural learning, but not considering them as two different things. So I may mention evidence of language learning, and you may think what I'm showing is not evidence of language learning at all, but I'd ask you to accept that, for example, talking about how people learn languages is part of language learning. And the focus of that evidence is really in terms of, or the sort of framework is in terms of theories of interaction and cognition that basically see cognition as something that arises from interaction, or takes place within interaction. And something that, a bit tongue-in-cheek, I call a digital discourse analysis for SLA. That's Chris would be familiar with the concept of CA for SLA. I don't know if that term is still used actually, but it is. Conversation, it's using conversation analysis and sort of micro-analysis of classroom interaction in particular to find evidence of cognition and learning within the interaction itself. And that was where I started, but Paul Seedhouse, who's involved in this, somewhere he wrote that he doubted very much whether you could use conversation analysis to analyze online interaction. So I sort of took that as a challenge and tried to see what you could do with YouTube comments in that respect. So please don't take that too seriously. The second aspect is in terms of YouTube. I don't know if anybody has seen, there are now a couple of academic books on sort of the culture of YouTube that have come out, and one that I've read from beginning to end is by somebody who calls himself Dr. Strangelove, Michael Strangelove, from Toronto. And what struck me about that book is that if you get all the big figures, if you write anything about YouTube, you have the first 3 pages have lots of billions in it, millions and billions. Okay, how big it is and so on, and how global it is. But then as I go through the book, everything is North American. Everything is in English. So what I mean by taking globalization seriously is really that if you look at YouTube as a sort of globalized phenomenon, it means that we have to sort of look at it from different perspectives. So what I'm doing here, in a sense, is what does YouTube look like from Hong Kong? if you take a look at it from here. Because I think if you look at it from North America, you can see that it's global. But then what you're actually seeing is pretty much North American. But there's all this other stuff going on that's perhaps not so visible, but becomes more visible. If you, set your browser to YouTube, to the Hong Kong server, and see what you see. It will not be exactly what many people expect to see, which is a kind of Chinese version of YouTube, in which everything is Chinese and posted by people in China. Actually, 90% of it will be in English, but there will also be some Chinese, and there'll be some Chinese. Okay, it will be translingual. What you will see is a lot of translingual practices. What I mean by translingual is really just practices that involve more than one language or more than one language variety, sort of rubbing up against each other. Okay, I just want to mention very quickly 3 studies, because there's a sort of narrative to how I got to this point. 3 studies I've done on YouTube comments, which are in actually sort of reverse order of publication. The first one was actually in the context of research on pop music, on language and pop music in Asia. And it was centered on 2 singers, Utada Hikaru and Tata Young, who's here, who are both very, very well known for singing in Japanese and Thai, respectively. But when they released English albums, and there were songs on YouTube in English. And the comments on these songs were very, very interesting, because there were a number of things, like why are they singing in English? Why are they doing this? Can they speak English? They shouldn't. Actually, they're both native speakers of English. They're bilingual. But people were questioning. They were saying, why is their English accent so terrible? There was also this issue where you can see it on these are CD covers. The Thai CD cover is visually very different. It's much softer, and there's a little puppy dog. The English CD cover is a much more kind of, sexually assertive. If you know the English Tata Young song is called Sexy Naughty Bitchy. So there's a theme to it as well. I don't want to go into that in detail, but what I got out of this was the idea that very often videos problematize language. If you hear the translingual practice is somebody you expect to be singing in Japanese or Thai is singing in English. So the video itself problematizes language, and that is reflected in the comments, and particularly in the fact. So these are recorded English language videos, and about 80% of the comments are about language. But of course, you can look at a Britney Spears video in English, and there'll be no comments on language. Yeah. So the problematization of language in the video influences the comments. So that, to me, makes comments worth looking at from this point of view. This was another study. Most of the work was done by my co-author. But this was based on the comments on a fan-subbed versions of the Olympic, Beijing Welcomes You, the Olympic song for the Beijing Olympics, whenever that was, I can't remember. And here we did, by fan-subbed, it's actually a schoolgirl from Beijing wrote subtitles for the song, which is in Chinese. And again, there are many, many comments related to the language. So what we did was look at the content of the comments, and we found these 4 main themes coming up, what people are talking about in the comments on this video, which were issues of translation, obviously, because she's translated. So they were discussing, is it a good translation or not? This translation's wrong, etc. On language forms, actually this is really direct sort of language teaching and learning going on. People asking the meaning of words and getting answers. about relationships between language and culture, and also about teaching and learning, which would, you get comments on YouTube like, hey, I'm a Chinese teacher, this is a really good video, I think I can use it in my class, that kind of thing. Okay. And lastly, this one, which Carmen loves. Time and the fact that I played it so many times prevents me from playing this video. This was a viral video in Hong Kong made by a schoolgirl called Ruby, who criticized she calls him an examiner, I guess he's an invigilator of the English examination, and when he gives the instructions, he makes several errors in English, according to her, which are quite funny. They involve things like saying shit down on your chair. What's it? Shit down on your chair. This kind of thing. And she does this. But she does it in extraordinarily... Well, first she does it in Cantonese. And that's kind of okay. But then there's a really lovely moment where she changes to English and she says, now, I'm going to tell you this in English because I want to tell the world. And then she goes on to tell the same story in, well, what I can only say is actually not very good English. And so this, of course, provoked a kind of storm of comments, like, your English is so bad, who are you to criticize, and so on. So there was a perfect sort of issue for a debate, and there were many versions on this, but there were far too many comments to analyze. The comments were in sort of tens of thousands. But what we found interesting about that was this notion of pedagogy in comments, which is the idea that, I mean, what YouTube comments are famous for is for being sort of rude, abusive, nonsensical, and so on. And part of my interest in doing this in the first place was, can you find anything interesting in something that is supposed to be so uninteresting as YouTube comments? And I began to find more and more and more. But what was interesting was often in the middle of a long sort of abusive comment, you would find this little pedagogical point. For the sake of time, I'm not going to actually show any, but I recall one where there's this long thing, and at the end it says sort of, well, every speaker of English has their own accent, which is just a kind of very fundamental point that we teach in university courses on world Englishes. And there's lots of comments like this, where most of the comment was kind of just a rant, but they were with this little pedagogical kernel. So those are the three things I've come out of, is the idea that videos, that translingual videos problematize language and cause discussion to take place, cause discussion of language to take place in comments. The four topics that I referred to, and the idea of pedagogy being contained in the word comments. So this is why I made the grant proposal and got a grant to study whether can I show, is there evidence of learning in these comments. So it's based on 10 groups of videos, and I'll show you a little bit of a couple of them and show you the 10 groups in a minute. But there were these research issues, and just now I'm just focusing on this one. How evidence of teaching and learning can be identified. So I will show some findings, but actually to me the methodology is the more interesting thing. This is the methodology of how we can use, or can we use, legitimately use discourse analysis methods to sort of find this kind of evidence. Because up to this point I've just been saying that there's teaching and learning and then showing a few comments. So is there a more systematic way that we can look for this kind of evidence? Okay, so I think I need to clean this. This is Carlos. Some people know him. You know him? All right, okay, you know him. He teaches, he's like a word a day kind of guy. He teaches, I believe he's supposed to be Peruvian, although he appears to have an American accent. And as you'll see, he has a Cantonese girlfriend, and she teaches him something, and then he teaches a word in Cantonese.
Okay, so here's the thing. The other day I was talking with my girlfriend, and we were looking through some pictures, and she's like, 你個樣咁挫嘅，咩意思啊？挫樣 ？What the heck does that mean? 挫樣 Well, today I'm going to tell you guys about the latest Hong Kong slang, 挫樣. This is what it means. Say a girl says to a guy, 你個樣咁挫嘅. Well, that means that guy in all these pictures and all the time is trying to make a cool face, like a cool guy, always trying to make himself look really handsome and really sexy in pictures, and he does it all the time, and it makes the girl want to choke herself. In all of my pictures. There you go, 挫樣. Hear it, speak it, memorize it.
Okay, so this is actually direct language teaching in the video. But it's significant here that it's a non-Cantonese speaker teaching Cantonese. This is kind of important in terms of the comments that follow from that. So in that sense, it's kind of problematizing language again. In terms of sort of Hong Kong language attitudes, the big question is like, what is this? How can this foreigner be teaching us Cantonese? He seems to know a word that I don't know, kind of thing. And people question whether the word exists. This kind of thing. So that's one. I'm just showing it as a sort of give a flavour of what we're looking at. And this is another one. For reasons of political correctness, I've called this an English speaker speaking Chinese. In Hong Kong, it would be called foreign speaking Chinese. And I also realised that she's not an English speaker, she's Norwegian. Well, she does speak English, but she's actually a Norwegian native speaker. And just a bit of content, because if you don't speak Cantonese, you won't understand anything at all, because she's just going to speak Cantonese. But she is a person who occasionally appears in the media, because Cantonese is notoriously difficult for foreigners to learn, or foreigners are notoriously bad at learning Cantonese, one or the other. But she's a little bit of a personality because she speaks Cantonese quite well and says everybody can learn it. It's not difficult. Just do it. Just learn it. So I just play you a little bit of that. So this is her speaking Cantonese.
我離開我自己國家，因為我頂唔順落雪，同埋凍。咁你呢度好悶熱啦，好啱我啦。3間房，有睡房，有黑房，有電腦房，電腦電視電房就有電。廚房、中文房同埋同埋天台。廚房，我喺呢度煮飯。嗱，呢個英語講啦。
So I think it's not been edited. So basically her kind of philosophy is just do it, just don't make a fuss about it, just get on with it and speak it and learn it. It's not difficult. She didn't post this video, somebody else has posted this video of her appearing on a TV, I think this is from the local TV channel. Okay, so that's two of the categories, and these are the 10 categories of video that we've looked at. Roughly the same number of we kind of set a limit where there's I think it's supposed to be a minimum of 200 comments related to language or culture within the category. So it's just a kind of random sample, not random at all. It's just a kind of what do you call that sample?
Convenient.
No principle to it at all. Principle to it. Non-random, non-representative. Okay. And because the objective is not to try to say something about the numbers, and that's why I'm a bit puzzled by the numbers that have come out myself and what they mean, because what we're really just looking for, like, as you often do in discourse analysis, enough data to be able to sort of find something interesting or say something interesting. Now, so just to show a little bit how this works, the total number of comments that we grabbed from all of these videos together was over close to 9,000. And then the first thing we had to do was kind of slice through them to take out the ones that had some reference or some relevance to language or culture. And that turned out to be, overall, it's about 30% of the comments, which I think is interesting in itself, because we select the videos because they involve two languages, or more than one language. And then again, this becomes reflected in the comments. In a very high proportion of the comments are focusing on those issues. What are the rest about? Why is there so many that are not about language and culture? Well, we just throw out things that say, great video, or, terrible video. So, but if it says, great video, I love the way she speaks Cantonese, then we include it. So that's the kind of principle. And when you look at the number of YouTube comments that really don't say very much at all, then I think that's actually quite a high proportion, quite a lot. And it's in a range, was actually not 32% in each category, but was a range from 58 to 18%. And this is the one, the chop yang. 58% of those comments were related. And the thing is, the ones that relate to singing, it's much lower, because a lot of the comments are about the singer or about the song. Just saying, I love the song. Okay, now to make it the theoretical bit, to make the connection between what's going on in YouTube and learning, I'm using this quote. You probably know Anna Spard, right? Who's the participatory and what's it? The two metaphors: participation and acquisition. And just the first sentence, really. For humans, every interaction constitutes an opportunity for both learning and teaching. So that implies to me, if we basically accept that proposition, that if we want to find evidence of learning in the YouTube and YouTube comments, we need to find interaction. We need to look at it. We need to look at those comments as a kind of interaction, as involving interaction. And I'll come on to a very crude method of doing that in a moment. And a couple of quotations from a recent book called Conceptualizing Learning. Conceptualizing Learning in Applied Linguistics, which Chris had contributed to it, and Paul Seedhouse and Steve Welch. Similar things, right? That learning is a social process embodied in interaction. Language learning is a social interactional accompaniment. And this is Diane Larson Freeman, who's second language acquisition guru. And this is actually in the context of a kind of commentary on this kind of conversation analysis approach. And she's saying that saying something has been learned, saying what has been learned, when it's being learned, and the reason it's being learned are big challenges for all SLA researchers. So that's just to situate this in the context of, I'm trying to find out if there's learning in YouTube comments, but if I look at research on language classrooms, on second language teaching, we know that it's extraordinarily difficult to produce any kind of evidence at all that people learn when they go to language classes. So, in a sense, it's the same kind of problem. That there's a very general problem of finding evidence of learning, and the very specific problem of finding it in YouTube comments. So, actually, I never claimed that I could find evidence of learning, but I said I could find maybe evidence of interactions in which learning might take place, or possibly, probably, because we don't know. You need to get access to the people, not to the comments, not just to the comments to get the kind of evidence. Okay? Now, I'll probably trip over myself trying to explain this, but this is really this is actually Discourse Analysis 101, right? This is Sinclair and Coulthard. Turns in conversation, initiation, response, I'm only looking at initiation and response. There's not much feedback in YouTube comments. But this is a very old framework for discourse analysis. But it's just to say, like, when I look at what appears to be a very flat thing, a YouTube page and a video and the comments and so on, how can I interpret that in terms of interaction? So the basic step, and if you don't accept this, you can stop listening now and read something more interesting. But if you accept it, it kind of carries on from here. And that is that in terms of a sort of initiation response or first turn, second turn framework, the video is the first turn. The video is the first turn. And it's a little bit like Facebook, okay? So you post a message on Facebook, or post a update, is it? Status on Facebook, and then comments come up underneath. So the update that you posted on Facebook is a first turn. It's an initiation. And then the comments, well, they could be responses to the initiation, or they could be initiations, or they could be they could be responses which then become initiations. And I'm looking at the video in the same sense. The video is like, instead of posting a Facebook update with words, you're posting a video. And what's said in the video, or what's shown in the video, is the first turn in an interaction. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we're not so much interested in that then, but what does that do to the comments? So it means that some comments, the comment could be a first turn, an initiation, which would be the case if it doesn't really respond to the video, if it sort of says something new. It could be a direct response to something in the video. Or if it's a response to the video, if somebody then responds to that comment, which doesn't happen that often in YouTube actually. There's not that much interaction within the comments. So that's why I needed to sort of develop this framework of treating the video, because just looking at comments where there is some interaction within the comments really reduces the number that you can look at. But if you get that interaction within the comments, then a response move can become an initiation move, which I think they usually used to call RI, okay? So these are some explanations where the comment is a second term response, where the comment responds to the video. So this person is responding to the person who uploaded the video, saying, thanks for explaining this term. So this is CHOP, right? This is to Carlos. So he's saying, thanks for explaining this term so well. You explained this much better in English than my friends in Cantonese. Or this is responding to the Cecilia, the Norwegian woman speaking Cantonese. In that case, where somebody uploads a video of another person, the commenters often confuse the uploader with the person. So here, he's talking to the person in the video, although she didn't post the video. They may not even know that it's there. And this is in sort of the YouTube comment language. Okay. Do you want me to translate it? Okay.
Translate raffle.
Lots of laughs, are you rolling on the floor laughing? So, laugh out loud. So, are you Chinese? So, I think this is I guess it's a kind of ironic comment. And then, I know my parents would be like, Okay, this is referring to a common thing, is that if you are a foreigner and you speak Cantonese, older people particularly will not actually answer you. They'll just say, wow, you're speaking Cantonese. This kind of thing. So he's making this as a kind of joke. But responding to the person in the video. Okay, I don't want to read these out, but this last one is the example where a lot of them are not to anybody in particular. And this is a case where the response move, I speak Canto and Dan, you speak better than me, that's to the video uploader, but then somebody else has come in and replied to this comment that says the English not speaking very well. Okay. Now, a second approach first approach to analysis now, after this, was to basically use some sort of speech act analysis to code the different moves in terms of, again, it's very basic. And it goes back to when we use the framework in the end from Anita Stenstrom. But there have been studies, actually, this one in particular, that have looked at learning and interaction. You can't really see that, but they developed this knowledge construction category system to analyze a bulletin board messages in a context of classroom, follow up from lectures. The point was, we thought of like maybe we could use something like this, but then we realized that this was actually very similar to a basic kind of speech act taxonomy. So what we did was refer to Stenstrom, which is a very old book, classifying different acts in discourse. And we used a kind of subset which involved information exchange. So if you look down this list, you can see that some of them are related to exchange of information, others are not. And the subset, well, maybe you'll see what that subset is because I'll show a couple of examples. I'm kind of running out of time. And this is just an example of how we did that with those two. So these are the two I just showed on the previous slide. So you get, it's color-coded just to match the two sides. So you get, thanks for explaining this term so well, with an exclamation mark, which in this system is thank plus react. React is a kind of emotional, in conversation, saying things like, oh, or things like that would be classified as react, or damn, or something like that. But which very often comes up through different symbols in YouTube. Through particularly sort of multiple exclamation marks, sort of very common. And then you explain this much better in English than my friends in Cantonese. So that's an evaluation where the commenter is evaluating what has been said in the video. And get a react and a react. And then this particular one, you get uptake. This is from discourse analysis point of view, I think this is quite an interesting thing because these kinds of things often function as an uptake, just the sort of acknowledgement that you've heard something. And these react moves, like laugh out loud, is the person's not laughing but expressing an emotion. What they're doing is saying, I watched your video, and my comment is relevant to your video. Then, I don't know, an evaluation, are you Chinese? And then, I don't know if this is an opinion or an information, or and then the react at the end. Okay, now what we've done initially is just to count them, just to count the numbers that occur. Okay, thanks. Just to count the numbers that we found among these 2,800 comments. And it comes out something like this. Now, the more I look at these numbers, the more meaningless they become. I have a problem with understanding. My numbers are a real puzzle, actually. But what that shows to me is, in fact, this accounts for, so primary acts and secondary acts. So when you have, like, laugh out loud, are you Chinese? Are you Chinese is the primary act. Laugh out loud is the secondary act because it just introduces the primary act. Yeah, so in general, a move can consist of several acts, of which one is primary. So let's not go into that. These are really more substantial acts that take place. The thing is that these actually account for, that's more than half of the moves. So what this is showing really is through expressing opinions, evaluations, giving information, answering questions, that these are the most frequent moves that you find. So it means that this set of comments is really quite information rich. It's quite, you know, it's quite substantial. It's not nonsense. It's not people talking nonsense. It's people really are exchanging information. And this is the interesting one is challenge. Challenge, actually we invented this move It's not in normal things, but it's when it's something that's very common in YouTube where you actually just say that somebody is an idiot. You just say that something is stupid, but you don't provide a reason for that. You just say your video is rubbish, or what you're saying is just nonsense. Now, there's rather a lot of this on YouTube, in YouTube comments, which suggests that as well as a lot of sort of exchange of information, there's also quite a lot of exchange of sort of ill-informed, uninformed opinion as well at the same time. The secondary acts also are quite interesting because these numbers add up to quite a high proportion of the terms that are in there. And it's showing that in fact, many people, so a move could be a pine plus expand, which means that you express an opinion and then you develop that opinion. So the expand is developing the term. Or justify means that you say, I really like your video because give a reason for that. So again, and a qualifier is of course to say, you don't speak Cantonese very well, but then again, you're pretty good for a foreign language. So these are quite frequent, and again, it seems they show that there's quite a lot of, that the exchange that's going on is quite substantial. Okay? So from here, what I'm finding is that there is evidence of information exchange within this interaction. And most of the primary acts are informational. Well, it's more than 95% involve that. There's evidence of substantial argument, in that many acts are expanded, justified, or qualified. There's also evidence of interactive commenting, and that relates to the number of uptake moves, which are actually connecting one comment to another comment, or connecting comments to the video. So this really shows that it's not just a long list of comments, which is how it looks. First time you look at it, you see a long list of comments. When you look at it more closely, you see links among the comments and between the comment and the video. Now, the second kind of analysis we did, again, was very simple. And I was looking for the reference to this, but there's somebody who actually, is it Heritage? I think John Heritage, who argues that, for example, if you say I think something, right? You say I think it may rain later. But in saying the word think, you are actually, the cognition is taking place. You cannot separate the cognition of thinking that it is going to rain from the act of saying that it's going to rain. Is that right? Yeah. That's a kind of assumption, particularly in discursive psychology literature. So it seemed reasonable from that to look at a number of categories of verbs and words that were occurring, which included what I guess I call verbs of cognition, which are things like I know, I learn, know, learn, understand, think, and so on. Things that refer to the sort of the status of knowledge, words like actually, probably, right and wrong. This is sort of a bit of a ragbag category, anything that's not a verb, but which seems to refer to cognition in some way. And also the use of sources of evidence, which were three kinds. Basically people, and these are not very frequent actually. This is another kind of interesting thing, is that people express opinions and exchange information, but they don't really say where it came from very often. But when they do, they can either refer to sort of texts, like sometimes people quote whole sections of Wikipedia. They can say, somebody told me I heard this, or I got a friend who told me this. Or most often actually they refer to their own personal experience. But the number is not that big. And here, these are the number of occurrences. So I think just ignore that. And if I look at this, the use of verbs of cognition is very, very frequent actually. So that's, we're looking at 2,800 comments and 835 of them. That's about a third, yeah, okay, no problem. About a third of them actually include a phrase like I know, I understand, and so This is less frequent, referring to status of knowledge. But if you combine those two together, it's quite a lot. And this is, I suppose, striking. It's showing that people don't show their sources. So basically, references to cognition are frequent and around 50% of the comments. And what does that consist of? Well, I think one of the earlier comments, does he actually say, I learned something? They often say, thanks, I've learned something from this. So people often say that they have actually learned something, or they've understood something. So they actually give a direct report that they've learned. They modulate their claims to knowledge, which seems to show that they are aware of sort of how reliable what they're saying is, or how truthful it is, or how much people should trust them. And actually also very frequent are explicit discussions of other people's learning. So if you think about when the word learn comes up, people are saying, I've learned something. But also they're very often saying, I'm learning Chinese, I'm learning English, or I don't understand Cantonese, or something like that. Okay? And they less frequently refer to sources of evidence. How many minutes have I got?
3.
You'll have to trust me that there is a song by Jay Chou called Faru Shui, because I don't have time to play you a bit of the song. And that's somebody, and that is actually a very, do you know the song? Does anybody know the song? It's Hair Like Snow. And it's a very complex lyric in Mandarin, which refers to some classical Chinese story. And somebody has subtitled the video, and the basic theme of the comments is that it is actually not possible to translate this song into English. So there's lots and lots of discussion about the translation and also the meaning of the song. And this is just an extract that I've taken out. So if you look through it, it goes down here and then down here. So somebody says, honestly, can somebody tell me the meaning of the song? The English subtitle is no help because it makes no sense at all. Because the subtitle makes no sense. Great video, etc. But I'm so confused about the music video and the lyrics. Then B comes in replying to A. I'm showing this as an example. Not exactly common, but this is a good example of a kind of quite dense sort of learning interaction that's taking place. So B then replies to A and says what he thinks the song is about, or she thinks the song is about. Then C replies to B and says, well, going through all these comments helped a little, meaning I think all the other comments, but thanks for this comment. That's my interpretation of that. Then A comes back in and replies to B, and says, well, that explains a little, thanks. Then D comes in, a fourth person comes in, and comes up with another interpretation. And then A comes back again and replies to D now, and says, well, actually, now that sounds a little better. So A is saying that D's explanation seems to be better than B's explanation, okay? Now, I just want to show what this looks like. The last thing I'm going to do, actually, is to show what this looks like when it's coded. And I feel that when it's coded, the coding of it seems to bring out the extent to which learning may well be involved in what's going on here. So the red here are references to status of knowledge. So just in the first one, the person saying honestly, then saying it makes no sense at all, I'm so confused. So they're actually talking about the state of their knowledge here. You've got the cognitive verb here, I think this song, which also refers to status of knowledge. And then most of the lyrics talk about being with the same person. This is a source of evidence because he's calling on the lyrics as evidence for the meaning of the song. And we also see the exchange of information. We see uptake, we see evaluation, we see expansion, we see answers to questions, and so on. And again, I really quite like this, because A actually starts off by saying it makes no sense at all, I'm so confused. And then up here says, well, that explains a little. So A is saying, like, now I've learned something, I understand more. And further along, it sounds a little better. It explains about her hair like snow. So it explains more, now I know even more than I knew last time. So this, I think it's quite a nice example of sort of 3 steps where this person is actually showing that they have learned something. But I have to say that this kind of length of an interaction and the sort of depth of the learning that seems to be going on there is a bit unusual. But it is actually found here and there. And in others, I think we're finding the evidence of learning as well. But whether there's evidence of learning there or not is one question. But really at the moment what I'm more interested in is whether there is a methodology here which would find the evidence if it was there, or if it isn't there. So that's me. Thanks.
Right, so again, we'll hold the questions and comments until after Alice's presentation. So Alice is with us at the Department of English at the university. She'll be talking about recreational learning and digital practices.
So hi everybody, this is me and recreational language learning and digital practices, and it's pretty much a work in progress. I'm thinking about this, and it's been on my mind for about 2 years now, and just starting to get serious about this project here. So when I think about foreign language learning, so the basic 4 ways to learn a foreign language. You get the class-based instructions, learning institutional as well as private, and then you have self-directed learning materials which have been popular for the last 3 years, and immersion, so just go somewhere to learn the language, and the language exchange, you go get a pen, go get a boyfriend, girlfriend, just do your language. And so, like, what if you are learning a foreign language as leisure activities? The starting point is that I'm surrounded by Chinese people who are learning a foreign language, like French, German, Italian, Spanish, which they have no intention of ever speaking or using, and except to tell people that I've learned French, Italian for 2 years, and I can read the labels off the menu or something like that. So when we think about recreational language learning, if you think about being like binary ideas in a way. That's, for example, we always think of voluntary and non-voluntary. That would be like our students in Hong Kong when they're being forced to learn English, for example, because it's in the curriculum, it's in the syllabus. And then people have that hobby versus activity that we have to learn to survive. And that mentions used the word recreational interactions, but he used it as a kind of interaction in natural setting. So it's not really about language learning. It's like you use the interaction that's natural, and you somehow learn a little bit of words and phrases. So it's not something that I remind. And I'm referring more to the dictionary idea that is relating to or denoting activity done for enjoyment, especially the word enjoyment when one is not working. But somehow Hong Kong people like to make it into work and go to classes and like that. So recreational foreign language learnings, RFL, is a learning for leisure or personal reason. You're not earning an additional degree or diploma. Sometimes you do have certificate, but it's like you finish one class, one semester, something like that. And you're not really related to work or study purposes, mostly. And it takes place outside working hours, particularly with adults. So we have a small project with adults, but I'm going to focus on 2 projects that I'm doing, or I finished. And it's, the first one is 3 English majors, and then the last one is me there. And I want to use positioning theory And this is a work in progress, so open for a lot of criticisms and helpful comments and things there. So in positioning theory, there's a concept that where you're being self-positioned, deliberate self-positioning, or you're being forced by forced other positionings. So other force you into certain categories, and other positionings where it's deliberate positioning of others and forced positionings of others there. So positioning can be understood as discursive constructions of personal stories that make a person's action intelligible and relatively determinate as social acts, and within which members of the conversations have specific implications here. And I'm quite interested in the idea that what they're talking about is when you're thinking about positionings, that you have to have a personal story. You have to think about who you are, and there's a continuity and coherence to it. So take a look at with the idea of deliberate self-positionings. Then, and when the people with using positioning theories in the classroom interaction context, isn't it? It's like this, we know that or about this. It's all in conversations, how you use certain words and certain phrases to make yourself a member or not a member, or how to create space to tell your own stories there. And but in a conversation, if we're talking about with technologies, like how do you try to think about that one? So is when Levenhelm and Bertolone, that's when they talk about that. If you think about technologies, that you're not necessarily just conversation between two persons or between groups there, but everything that is written about technologies or on the technologies there. So it will become clearer when I get you the examples there. So when I think about learning online, so how about learning online for free? So we started a project with 3 English majors who all got modern language learning backgrounds in the classroom. So they're taking German, French, whatever. And then me is pretty hopeless for language learners. There we have 4 weeks that we use only free online resources, and we keep a block learning with each other as a support group. And then we each choose a language we've never learned before, 4 weeks, and see what you can do. So Italian, Korean, French, and Spanish were chosen. We each set our personal goals and pathway. The only requirement is that it has to be free. It has to be online. So you can't go into the library because you're a student to get the self-help book. So how to navigate around online resources. And everybody did surprisingly well in 4 weeks. So these are the resources that we have used. And you can see that actually everybody does a lot of things very differently, depending on your preference and what you know. And we sort of teach each other what to get as well. For example, I got hooked up with this, the Vida Loca, and then I told the Italian learners about the BBC website, which is now defunct, and she took up the Italian steps to do that, and then each other kind of exchanged that. So we met 3 times to discuss our progress, and then we comment on each other's blog and learning resources. And then the conclusions that we have at the end of 4 weeks is that there's no fun. There's no fun, only confusion. And we felt like we were just a digital flaneur. That, for example, when you think about structures, what do you learn after you can say, I come from in whatever language? Or you like after you've been able to count from 1 to 100 in Italian, what do you do after that? And then the membership group is our 4 little people group is not really enough. It's that we're not here and not there, and because we 4 chose different languages, so we can't really quite talk about the problem that we have. And then the biggest problem that I realized when I listened to the conversation again is that they complain that I don't know who I am as a learner, that they cannot construct an autobiography of themselves as a learner of Italian or Korean or French. So that makes me think about like positioned as a learner, as a category, is the most important identity category for recreation of foreign language learning. So that so it becomes clear that you have to become in a quotation mark, that you have to learn to become a foreign language learner. So if we applied data-centered positioning theory, so first of all, you learn what are the available sort of vocabularies for that, and then you participate in the discursive practices, and then you start to position of oneself, which actually involve imagining positioning oneself as if one belongs in one category and not in the others. And the recognition of oneself having the characteristic that locate oneself as a member, but not in the others. And that's involved a lot of emotional commitments there. So that gave me the project of going to say, learn a foreign language for free. And what does that involve? It's actually involved millions and millions of learners. And which I'm just seeing perhaps like 4 extremely popular learning websites there. Because I'm thinking, okay, I don't know how to learn foreign language beyond the count to 1 to 100. So let's try something that's fixed there. So my chosen ones are the 2, the Duolingo and Busuu. Okay, so these are from the official logo available online resources there, and that's from their things. And okay, so 2 different websites, 2 different companies in a sense. So Duolingo is much younger, 2011. Busuu is from 2008, and Duolingo's have over 1 million users. They have quite a loyal following, 100,000 people active daily. And then you have Busuu, they say that they have 30 million users, but only 200,000 active daily. And the very, very important thing with Duolingo is that your academic background plus venture capital, and then the Busuu is the business model, and Duolingo is free forever. They stress that it's free forever, and at the moment it's 6 languages. They are planning more, including Chinese. And Busuu is a freemium model, which is very familiar. You got freebies for the beginners one, and then you have to pay for the more advanced levels. So they offer 12 languages, and the slogan for Duolingo is free language education for the world. And Busuu is your language learning community, join now for free. And why I say that is very important is that it's a public place. That for Duolingo, it's very unusual because they put forward Professor Louis Vonan from CMU, Carnegie Mellon University, as the spokesperson, that he introduces that TED Talk and everything, and he is Duolingo, even though he got a whole team of collaborators and researchers there. And then you have Busuu with Lisner, and he is supposed to be a miracle, a wonderful as well, because it was an MBA project, and it becomes extremely successful websites here. So my question is start thinking about is how do we try to understand these massive online language learning events? We talk about every day 100,000 people or 200,000 people learning languages at one time or another. So how do we start thinking about that? And so my question for myself is, first of all, how is learning presented? Okay. So that means the pedagogy is implied, structured, the public discourse and the user experience, and then how are learners positioned? So so if I use the website, who am I? Can I get a story? Can I present these stories there? And of course, what are the digital practices involved? Like, is it one-to machines or is it social network, language learning? And so how do we try to understand these massive online learning events? So when I think about the learning is presented through different sources, textual information on the website, for example, on the About Us, FAQ, blogs, reports, all the written words about that, and then we have the visual information. And this is more interesting to me in the sense that, and this is also something that I'm still working on, the icons, the images, the colors, and the pathway of using whole website there. And the process of learning, the interactions, when I'm interacting with the machines, what was it like? Or if I'm interacting with other user online, what is it like? And there's a media report and interviews there. So Duolingo, let's start first. So that's the homepage. First of all, even though it doesn't stress that it is community-based learning, you can sign up with Facebook. Yeah. So you can join that, and I signed up with Facebook, and then I got other friends to join as a result, because I popped it up that I just got a star for my Italian there. So Duolingo. And so learning languages in Duolingo, this is their official word. It's completely free, now and forever. This is actually an unbelievable commitment on their side when they say now and forever. With no ads or hidden fees, wondering how that can it be, and he's already Googling. And so it is because you create value by translating real-world documents while you're learning. Now, this is actually not transparent. No, you don't know what are they talking about, right? It's basically, and that's the whole thing, is that the learning is not learning. Learning is a transaction. It's that you do something for us, and well, we give you the freebie of learning. It's there. And so there's a huge buzz about a year ago, actually 2 years ago, 2011. Yeah, a year and a half ago, that when Professor Bonan gave a TED talk, everybody referred to it, that he gave a TED talk, free language learning, freebie. And then you have on the whole video was the whole talk was about 16 minutes. And he doesn't talk about it right at the beginning. He talked about, I forgot the word, capture. You know, like when you have to
Capture.
Yes, it's really annoying thing that you can't read the stuff and then you have to authenticate and you type in nonsensical words, right? So he was explaining that's actually helping to translate the web.
Yeah.
That's what's every time you translate type in something that doesn't make sense, you're helping the world using. And I never knew that. I thought I just have to show that I'm not a machine. But anyway, so he moved on from that project to a language learning project with that. Okay, and so it's 16 minutes. He keeps talking about how wonderful that capture is, and then he's moving on. It's only in 8 minutes that he starts talking about. Oh, by the way, we got a new website here and a new exciting project on this. And so he talked about that it is a learning with real content, and it's a fair model for education here. So it's a concept of learning. First of all, that is quite interesting. Is why is it fair? The kind of words that they use to create an idea. Okay. So Duolingo is free for real, scientifically proven, learning gamified, also on the go. So these are 4 slogans on their homepage. So gamification just simply is applying game elements and digital game design techniques to non-game problems and contexts. Yeah. So when we think about, okay, so how learning is presented, first of all, and when you click on that, you see that it's free for real. No fees, no ads, no gimmicks. A college quality education without the price tag. And so there you have the performative positioning. It's like there is a financial burden to foreign language learning. And then scientifically proven that, you remember, I really love this. They have a nuclear sign. I mean, I always associate it with nuclear solutions and nuclear plant. And so it's actually, okay, so it's rocket science, basically, here is implying that. That is an independent study found that Duolingo's trump university level language learning. So you move from the language-wise is And I mean, it probably is the same in North American context, but for the rest of the world, you move from college to university, that it sounds like a step up for the rest of the world. And then the learning, gamified, lose heart with incorrect answers, practice against the clock, level up, Duolingo is addictive. You have addictive and you have language, gaming language, you have lose heart and with incorrect answers. And then the curious thing is like start positioning the learner is make your break and commutes more productive with the Duolingo iPhone app. So you're not allowed to relax practically, that the learning itself is productive. Yeah. And so on their website, learning is presented visually, usually, and it's simplified as well. They have a 45-page report, but this is all you need to know of that report. 34 hours Duolingo equals to 11 weeks university semester. I'm still clocking in, so I'm waiting to get my 11 weeks university education. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm learning German over here.
So Gusu, the conception of learning and presentation of learning is very, very different. That this is the home page. Again, you can log in with your friend through Facebook. Here you got 4 cards. The interesting part of this is that the second half of their website, that you get access to grammar and then so in sponsorship with it. And then you have a scene on, so there is a lot of ads for that company already. And then you also have, every time you log in, every time you go to the homepage, you have 2 model learner, like trying to say how great is this. So Gusu Learning, they have learn languages online with interactive language courses and lessons, connect with the worldwide community to practice your language skill, download our mobile apps and get access to grammar guides. And then we have personally, now it's quite interesting that when they talk about how innovative they are, they first talk about we personally suffer from the traditional way to learn a new language, which we always found expensive, difficult, and boring. So we start with the counter at the suffering, expensive, difficult, and boring, to put you on their side. And then the positive is that we decided to create a new concept, And you learn from native speakers, learn directly from native speakers, and you have the pronouns I'm using as the we, the also community, and you can practice. And we have this, we have that. Learn with our materials, learn for free. The learn for free here is quite interesting of maneuver is that Gusu.com can be used. There is a very a moment of hedging there, but the accounting one is that you have the option, you gain access when you pay for your membership, premium membership, which is actually very, very expensive. So the learning process visualized here. So this is Duolingo. That's Robbie just experienced a little bit of it. And in the beginning, that stage, you got 4 hearts, basically. And now, as you move into more advanced level, you only got 3 hearts, so don't get too excited. And so you sometimes it's just matched like this, or it could be translations, for example. Don't get me to start speaking embarrassing Italian. I'm not good at that. But you make a mistake, you lose a heart, and then you got that. You don't get that. It's only the first level that you got all coming in. But now, every time you they tell you whether there is right answer or wrong answer, you have the option of to discuss a sentence. Okay, for example, this will use 25 people, so I've already talked about this. And for example, so this is me trying to join in the conversation. Okay. And you can be supportive of somebody explaining something to you. And then you can also synthesize it with somebody. Maybe they complain or whine about why did I get a wrong answer or lose a heart. Okay. And of course, you can also have a nonsensical sentence. For people who don't read Italian like me, the sausage is in the restaurant. And then you have what's eating? And then so you have that. So you frequently have that kind of turns to sort of upstage what you're limited to do. Okay? And so there is a lot of joking around because this sentence absolutely does not make any sense in any language, I believe. It's just content-wise, right? So you have different stages in the gamified world of learning. You got your skill tree, you got the leaderboard. Before I make friends with other people, I was the leader on my board with all my Facebook friends there. And Pusu learning is slightly different. That they have interactive lessons and blah blah blah. And then the last part they promise you is to get access to grammar guides. And that's what they don't use, of course, is premium features. Okay. So this is the lesson page that I screen captured. You see this. The annoying bit is that they have lots of advertisement on the lesson page. And so every page, everything, you got your ad. And usually it's about language learning. Or it could be their own self-promotions like upgrade to premium. And then sometimes you got things for threadless, and sometimes they get into like you're getting bold, get your hair medicines and something. And okay. So this is your own personal page to tell you where you are in your lessons. And then of course you get the ad again here. And then the second half is that your exercise, your work, and then is help others in Chinese or in any other language you claim to be native in. And the curious thing is, of course, is there is a busu, berries. This is what everybody wants, because if you accumulate a certain number, you can go to the market, you can go shopping. And okay. So you see, I bought hedgehogs. And most of you know that I'm obsessed with hedgehogs there. And of course, the learning is presented as the market, basically, a marketplace, a commodity there on both websites, basically, implicitly or implicitly. And how are the learners positioned? They're positioning through a storyline. So in digital age, think about storyline and your autobiography will be your profile sections. Okay? For example, Duolingo, you have 140 character bio, so it's Twitter length. A photo and a forced bilingual identity. And Wusu is that you have different sections to tell who you are, that your country, your city, your age, your occupation, and self-introductions. A photo only for premium user, and banner ads, they're the commodified me. So there is certain deliberate self-positioning. So for example, if I post my photo with a classic cup in a champagne, and then it's like my own little profile, only 140 characters, and you can see that whether somebody is actually logging through Facebook. You see the blue little F there. And you have your score, you have your how many words. So I've been learning for 18 days, it's only 144 words. It doesn't seem to be very efficient. Yeah. And these are my friends and followers. And then there's a very strong force positioning. This is the category you have to choose.